Just by way of introduction, our next speaker, Loy Brunson. I met Loy a few years ago. There was a speaker that had come out here from Florida to do a presentation, and it was at Loy's studio down in Provo. And Loy got up and started to talk about the Constitution for a few minutes before this speaker. And during that period of time, I kept thinking, just keep talking. I loved it. And he had a great message to share. And even though he only spoke for a few minutes, I wanted to hear more. And so I wanted to have him here today to talk about some of the principles of the Constitution and share some of what he has spent a lot of years looking at it in a unique way. And so with that, please welcome Loy Brunson.
I'm not a singer, but I love to sing one song. Some people say a man is made out of mud. A tax-paying man is made of muscle and blood and skin and bone, a back strapped with debt that the shareholders own. 17 trillion, and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. Taxes and interest from shore to shore. The Federal Reserve is the company store. Now, a lot of people won't understand that, but hopefully I'll have enough time. I only have 45 minutes, so I'm going to have to talk fast. Oh, thank you. I have other verses of that, too. So why is it important to study the Constitution? I mean, it's the most difficult thing in the world to understand, according to college professors. They don't even teach law students the Constitution. Well, about 5 years ago, I got a guilty complex from watching Fox News one too many times. They mentioned the Constitution. I thought, have I ever really read the document seriously? So I thought, I'm going to do it once in my life before I die. I'm going to read the Constitution. And I tell you, let me tell you, Article 1, the most difficult thing I've ever read in my life. It's like, oh, I can't do it. I can't finish that. There's 6 more articles to go. I can't do it. Article 2, Section 1, last paragraph, changed my life. The President's oath. I had just heard our president, who had sworn and subscribed with his signature that he would defend and uphold the Constitution. I had just seen him on national news literally do the opposite and said that the Constitution was fundamentally flawed. I couldn't believe it, so that got me going. And I started reading the Constitution, and it seemed like every time I read it through, I found something new. It was like before I went on my mission, I thought, well, I should read the Bible. That might be a good idea. And so I'm reading the New Testament, and I go, oh my gosh, I thought we were unique, and we didn't have any doctrines in the LDS Church that would coincide with the New Testament. But it proved what I had been taught in church and Sunday school. I couldn't believe it. The same way with the Constitution, I started reading things I could not believe it. So, to make a long story short, after doing this over and over and over, I thought, oh my gosh, I've discovered something I think revolutionary in the Constitution. I wonder if I'm just one of millions that have done this. So I started talking to people about it and sharing the concepts with people, and no one had ever heard these things before. So I finally was able to talk to Zeldin Nelson and Jeremy Nelson of the NCCS. I thought they should know. They've published 12 million booklets. They should know if I have something unique. And I said to Zeldin, kind of nervously, I explained 3 concepts that I'd found. I thought I had found that the Constitution we normally read is locked, because there are clauses in the document that just don't make sense and they contradict each other. For example, Thomas Jefferson said that the borrowing clause would destroy this country, and has it, almost. So how could it be an inspired document, a perfectly inspired divine document, if it has an evil clause that Thomas Jefferson said would destroy this country? How's that possible? I still believed it was a perfect document. Well, I believed at the time, and I believe now, that I found the answers to those questions, and to me, that's why the Constitution has come alive and blown my mind with its miraculous divinity. We have 7 articles, and any contract attorney, an honest contract attorney, would say that's a contract. And we have 27 amendments, and any honest contract attorney would say those amendments change the first 7 articles. So how do they change the first 7 articles? And why were the first 10 amendments called the Bill of Rights? Why weren't they called the 10 amendments to the Constitution? I think that was some kind of a device to get us off the track of how powerful the first 10 amendments are. So I read Amendment 5. I read Amendment 9. I read Amendment 13. I read all the amendments, but those were my favorites. And I thought, wait a second, Amendment 5 says you cannot have your private property taken from me for public use without just compensation. What the hell is taxation? That's taking your private property from you without just compensation. What the hell's going on? Amendment 9, my favorite discovery, the interpretation clause. We're governed by interpretation of the document. But how many people read it and have an interpretation? But Amendment 9, so powerful to me. I ran for U.S. Senate in 2012, more as a filmmaker than anything else, because I knew I didn't have a chance. I didn't spend any money, so I knew there was no chance. But I got to give a presentation, 2 minutes about money, and I want to get into that a little bit, because money is so important with how the Constitution was established, because the most important clauses within the Constitution have to do with money. So I told my friends at the NCCS, I says, hey, Amendments 5, 9, and even 13 change the tax clauses, the borrowing clause, and the gold and silver clause. And we can get into that too, because I was a real, anyway, I won't talk about that right now. And so after explaining it to them, Zeldin looked at me and he repeated back. He says, so what you're saying is Amendments 5, 9, and 13 change the borrowing clause, the tax clauses, and the gold and silver clause. I says, yeah, I think so. I hope you agree. He says, you're right. We've never heard that before. We're going to publish it. And he says, I would like that message to go to every home in America more than just the Constitution. So I want to get into that a little bit too as we go along. Going back to Amendment 5, private property. How are we going to fund government if we can't be taxed? If it is unconstitutional to be taxed according to Amendment 5, and 13, involuntary servitude is against the law in every state, and Amendment 9, you cannot interpret the Constitution in ways that deny or disparage the rights of the people, which are unalienable, which include the right to own property, then how are we going to fund government? Well, we don't know because we haven't been educated. Our civics education has been a complete failure in this country the last how many years? Unbelievable. Very simple economics have been completely neglected. Case in point, Abraham Lincoln funded government without taxation. He funded the Civil War because he was advised by one of his advisors that you don't need to tax the people. They didn't have time to tax anyway. And you don't need to borrow at 37 or 30% interest, which were his options. And his advisor gave him a very simple bit of advice. He says, use the Constitution and work with the Congress and coin money and pay your soldiers and pay government costs with it. Well, President Lincoln says, well, they're going to accept that? Why would they accept it? He says, well, one, it's going to be really beautiful paper and colors. One side's going to be green. And the other thing is, it's going to be the law of the land. It'll be legal tender. They'll have to accept it. And so what did he do? He funded government without taxation and without borrowing. And if anyone wants to know what I think about our national debt, well, what we need to do is have a little visit with the Rothschilds and the Schiffs and the Morgans and a few other families that started the Federal Reserve System in 1913 and say, we're going to have to put you in jail unless you cooperate, and we may have to jail you anyway, but we're going to take back all your assets. And oh yes, and Congress is going to take back the power to create money because Article 1, Section 8 is very specific about who can create money. It can't be a bunch of central bankers posing as an agency of the government. And so if we were to take back the power to create money and took back all the assets, including what is owed to the Federal Reserve, there would be no national debt. And there would be no need for taxation. And then instead of money being an oppressive tool, it would be a servant of the people. Now, there's the #1 most watched documentary on the internet is called The Money Masters, produced by a friend of mine. His name is Bill Still. You can check that out. Goes through the history of money and explains a lot of that. Now, there was one other president in the history of the United States that worked with the Congress and let the government issue money. What other president was assassinated? Exactly, JFK. So only two times has our government used their constitutional power and the most important, the most valuable power within the Constitution to coin money. Now, some of you are LDS, and I like to get off on little hobbies occasionally, but I read D&C 117 lately, and the last verse, The Lord said, remember to overthrow the money changers in mine own due time, saith the Lord of hosts. Even so, amen. Well, what's a money changer? Might be considered a central bank that creates $1 trillion out of thin air, and before they loan it, before any interest at all is charged, it's 100% pure profit for mostly the Rothschilds. Why are they so wealthy? Well, what if you were given unlimited power to create money and loan it and spend it? And not only is there not oversight with their loaning, but there's no oversight with their spending, their private spending. So they have central banks throughout the world that literally are leading this whole world into slavery, their slavery. So anyway, I think I've said enough. I'll go now. So anyway, so why is it important to why is it important to study the Constitution? What can we do? Well, there was a man in 1961, a high school dropout. You probably know the story. Clarence Gideon. He was arrested because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was outside of a bar, and he might have had a half-empty bottle of wine and a pocket full of change. He went to jail, and he knew how to read, and that was about it. He could write with a pen or a pencil, but that was it pretty much. And he decided he was going to study the Constitution. Well, because he decided to read the Constitution, study it, this is what happened. A landmark case in United States Supreme Court history. In it, the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that state courts are required under the 14th Amendment and the 5th and 6th, it's pretty clear if you read it, to provide counsel in criminal cases to represent defendants who are unable to afford to pay for their own attorneys. The case extended the identical requirement that bans so on and so forth. So here's an example of one person deciding he was going to take the Constitution seriously, and look at the personal effect it had on him, and look at the wide effect that it had on this whole country. So I encourage my friends and everyone to start reading the Constitution and skip over the stuff that doesn't make sense. Skip it. Don't get bogged down like I did until you find something that makes sense. Amendment 24, that's a favorite of mine too. If you are in prison for failing to pay any taxes, felony charge, you could refer to Amendment 24, because Amendment 24 says that you cannot be denied your right to vote for failure to pay any taxes whatsoever, which would mean they would have to reduce the charge to a misdemeanor. Anyway, so there are a lot of fun, exciting things within the document. Now, in 2010, I produced a documentary called The Oath of Office. My brother decided to help me, and he says, hey, go start asking questions, and there was Mike Lee. He hadn't won the race yet, and I said, okay, I've lost my notes, I've lost my questions, and okay, I'll just ask him whatever. So I said, Mr. Lee, what's the penalty for breaking the oath of office? And he said, there's no penalty. You just lose the election. I thought, well, wait a second. Article 6 requires that all of our state and federal representatives, not only our representatives, but all federal and state employees, take an oath to the Constitution. And if it's not bound, if it's not binding, then they're violating Article 6. And the only way a constitutional oath can be binding is if there are penalties attached to it. Well, and I've done a little research lately, and I found that there are 3 statutes in Utah, and apparently there are statutes in every state of the union that require either a misdemeanor or felony penalty for oath breakers to the Constitution. But because of the ignorance and not learning from our educational system, we don't know how to enforce the law. Instead, we raise flags and signs, hey, you robbed me, so please stop, instead of going to law enforcement or sheriffs or whatever and saying, hey, here's the statute, here's a video of the person, they obviously committed perjury or whatever, and then say, can you at least go warn them, since everyone's violating the law, can't you at least go scare them and say, hey, we're going to start, enforcing the law. So I think about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her atheistic views, and I'm thinking, wouldn't it be great if you could get her to sign in public a document, a contract, where she had to support our Lord? Oh, wait a second. She's already done that. Our Lord's in Article 7. And she took 2 oaths. As a Supreme Court justice, I believe when she took her oath, it was 2. It was a judicial oath that contained the constitutional oath in it, and then a more specific oath to the Constitution of the United States. Well, if we had our contract attorneys, and if they were honest, and we were to show them the 7 articles, the 27 amendments, and show them Article 7, and say, hey, if someone has sworn an oath to support the Constitution, are they obligated to support Article 7? And if they're obligated to support Article 7, are they obligated to support those 2 words, our Lord, in Article 7? And what does that mean? I mean, we are so upside down in this country when it comes to the knowledge of the Constitution. It's mind-boggling. So I have an idea. I have a couple of ideas. I was able to put on a television station, a local, nothing big, in 2012, a television show called Meet Utah's Candidates. And there was a picture up here. It showed Scott Howell. Scott Howell's a Democrat. Well, I had Democrats, I had Republicans, I had Constitutional Party, I had anyone that would be on the show that were legitimate candidates. And all we talked about was the oath of office and the Constitution. And I saw a unity and a synergism. The Democrat candidate for the House of Representatives had been to a military academy, and she read her oath. And she said afterwards, you get goosebumps. I got goosebumps watching it. She says, this is not an oath to a president or to a government or to a country. This is an oath to the Constitution of the United States, the greatest founding document of any country that's ever existed as far as we know in history. And so I thought, wow. So I'm thinking, hey, if I can do a television show like that, I think I can maybe do a television show every week featuring a high school with a competition. What would you do if you were president? And I'm making some progress there. I've met with a high school already, and we're working on sponsors. You might see a little flyer there that explains that if you know anyone that's interested in maybe helping support this. I've met with Fox 13, and they're excited about participating in it. And what it would be is the high school would be flooded with copies of the Constitution with instructions that you can win $1,500, $1,000, $500, whatever we can come up with, and other prizes if you are the top contestants in answering this question, what would you do if you were president? But you have to refer to the enumerated power in Article 7 to back it up. So what does this do? This gives them an introduction to the Constitution with a little quick lesson that if it's not there, they can't do it legally. And they've already sworn an oath to uphold and follow the Constitution. So I'm excited about that. So if you know anyone that would be interested in, well, our target date is in March to start doing it. And if we do this once a week, and if we do it in a way that it's really interesting, find the most talent that we can in each one of these high schools, then we can syndicate. And if we syndicate, it will fund itself like American Idol funds itself. And then we can branch out and do other versions of it. Instead of just high schools, we could open it up to the public and maybe have $1 million prize. So anyway, I'm excited about that. And I think that would be one way to just start getting the word out that the Constitution is not dead, it is alive. Now, this is the beginning of a 6-minute presentation I want to tell you a little bit about. When I ran for U.S. Senate, I was given 6 minutes at the state nominating convention. And my brother is my producer, and stand up, Darren, and videographer. He didn't stand up long enough, but. And so he says, I think you should, he says, I think you should, instead of speaking, just show a video that I put together. I said, no, I want to speak. I want to talk. That's why I'm there. Well, okay, so he gave me 4 minutes and he took 6. And so the 2 minutes that he put together is about the Federal Reserve System. I thought, you're going to show Harry Reid at a Republican convention, the state nominating convention. He's got Congressman Grayson, another Democrat, and he's got Alan Greenspan and Ben Bernanke. And so he says, yeah, we're going to do that. So 2 minutes of that, trying to explain a little bit and quickly about the Federal Reserve System and how corrupt they are, and then 4 minutes of me speaking. And so after it was all done, the applause was fantastic. I got great response. As a matter of fact, you'll see in the video that I had to stop and start over, not because I didn't know what I wanted to say, it's because it was so loud, I had to start over. The applause was that good. And you can't hear the applause because I have a microphone that's hooked directly to the camera, so you can't hear that. But so I think he decided that we should send it to someone high up in the church, right? Okay. So we did that, and I'm on my way home from a meeting in Orem, from meeting with Matthew Holland, because they have that new constitutional studies department, whatever, and I was presenting some ideas to him, and my phone rang in my car, and it was a different car I hadn't driven in a while, and it was, I said, hello. He says, hello, Brother Brunson, this is Elder Perry. I'm thinking, do I know a missionary? I said, who? He says, Elder Perry. I says, oh, then I thought, okay, Elder Perry, that's who we sent the link to. That's Elder Perry. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. And I thought, well, I couldn't hear you too well. I'm in my car. He says, give me the best advice I've ever heard in my life. Don't drive off the road. He said, don't drive off the road. I says, I won't. And then he says, I just came from the temple. I watched your video. It was wonderful. We're getting together. I was producing this TV show at that time. And so after the elections, Elder Perry and Julie Blaney, my associate producer with my TV show. Could you stand up, Julie? Please, Julie? Because she has more information about the TV show and sponsorships. So we went and met with Elder Perry for a half hour, and I had the audacity to suggest to him, among other things I won't get into, that we launch a promotional campaign of the Constitution in the United States to get a copy of the Constitution to every home in America. That's what I call it, every home in America. That's my trademark campaign, through the full-time missionaries. I said, Elder Perry, wouldn't that be a great missionary opportunity and public relations opportunity, an opportunity to raise awareness for the Constitution if the missionaries were to go to the doors of all the people in this country saying, hey, here's a copy of the rule of law, and regardless of whether you believe in God or not, the concept is wonderful because it protects your rights against any living human being, including the government. So you should embrace this concept regardless of what you believe, because rights are unalienable, and that's a beautiful concept whether you believe they're from God or not. And they are unalienable because they are from our Creator. So anyway, so would you like to see that 5-6 minute video that Elder Perry saw and called me about? Great.
Senator Dorgan has spoke out on the secrecy of the Federal Reserve System. There is no entity in the world that controls our lives more than the Federal Reserve System. What the Federal Reserve Board does, nobody knows what they're doing.
We have a privately owned central bank system disguised as a government-owned system.
There is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take. There is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take.
$500 billion, and you don't know who got the money?
The loans go to the central banks.
Who actually made that decision to hand out $1 trillion that way? $500 billion. Who made that decision?
The Federal Open Market Committee.
All right. Well, the Constitution says no money shall be drawn from the Treasury but in consequence of appropriations made by law.
This money is not drawn from the Treasury.
Is it safe to say that nobody in 1913 contemplated that your small little group of people would decide to hand out $500 billion to foreigners?
This particular authority has been used numerous times over the years.
The authority that Mr. Bernanke is referring to is the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Congressman Charles Lindbergh said the following: "This act establishes the most gigantic trust on earth. When the president signs this bill, the invisible government by the monetary power will be legalized. The people may not know it immediately, but the day of reckoning is only a few years removed. The worst legislative crime of the ages is perpetrated by this banking bill." After signing the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, President Woodrow Wilson said, "I have unwittingly ruined my country." I'd like to sing you a song, and if you know the words, please sing along with me. 16 trillion, and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. Taxes and interest from shore to shore. The Federal Reserve owns the company store. Thank you. It really is true, folks. If we don't understand that and we don't address that issue, all other issues become impossible to solve. We need help, And where are we going to get that help besides ourselves? This is a tough problem. Well, the Constitution contains the answers to all issues if we study the document. The Declaration of Independence gives us clues and answers as well. The signers of the Declaration, all of them, said that they could not have established this, the greatest country in 5,000 years, without the help of God, without the help of the divine hand of providence. And I say to my friends that don't believe in God, it's irrelevant. Whether you believe in God or not does not change the truth, the fact that believing in Him works. Now, how do we interpret the Constitution? Thank you. There are 4 references to God in the Declaration of Independence, and there are 2 references to God in the Constitution. So how do we interpret the Constitution? The Declaration of Independence tells us how to do that. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that we have unalienable rights from our Creator. For 4.5 months, the signers of the Constitution deliberated and debated and fought over every word within the document and its connected definitions. And they still all signed on to Article 7. Article 7 tells us who the God of the Declaration of Independence is, and who the God of the Constitution is, and who the God of this country is. Those 2 words are there in Article 7 telling us who it is. Our Lord. The 9th Amendment is the voice of God, in my opinion, telling us how to interpret the document. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. No construing the document in favor of federal government at the expense of the unalienable rights of the people. That is the voice of God. Now, what are we doing here today? Are we here to vote for our most favorite person to become a senator or a governor or a congressman? Are we here to support the defenders of the Constitution? We all have an obligation to defend our liberties. The Constitution is the most valuable tool, the most valuable weapon in defending our liberties. If we open up the document and we read the 9th Amendment, then we can understand Amendment 5. Amendment 13, involuntary servitude is against the law in every state. Amendment 5, you can't have your property taken from you, we're not just talking real estate, and have it redistributed at your expense. We need people in Washington reminding our representatives that they have a contract. It is against the law to be liberal. It is called the oath of office. It is called the obligation, the implied oath to the Constitution of the United States. It is called thou shalt not steal. God bless you all. Thank you for all you do. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hey, I appreciate that. It's been an exciting journey ever since I started reading the Constitution. It has changed my life, and talking about it and thinking and debating different points of it, it has really been quite a trip for me. I have I have a book and a booklet. I'm excited about this booklet because it is the first time in the history of America that the 9th Amendment has been identified correctly as the interpretation clause. So, if this is accepted by the country and the world, the value of this will skyrocket. So, and you have an opportunity to get one after. Thank you. Anyway, more seriously. So I have some of these, and they cost, when I do 5,000, they cost about $1 each to print. Anyone that's willing to donate at least $1 per booklet, they're great stocking stuffers. You're welcome to come back here and set some. And the book I have is normally $30, mark it down to $20. And if you want the DVD that I just showed here and the other DVDs, those are $5 instead of $10, marking those down too. So thank you for letting me come here and speak. You've been terrific. God bless you all.